The member for Forde.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for the Environment and Energy, representing the Minister for Education and Training. Will the Minister update the House on how the government's Gonski needs-based funding will support students and teachers at schools in my electorate, and is the Minister aware of any threats to the government's plans to deliver a fairer and long-term funding certainty for parents and schools around Australia?
The Minister for the Environment and Energy, representing the Minister for Education.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Forde for his question and know that he welcomes the Turnbull government's commitment to increasing funding for schools. The 41 schools in the member for Forde's electorate will get $1.95 billion, Mr Speaker, to 2027. Like Coomera State College, with over 2,000 students, a state school, will get $19 million, Mr Speaker. They will be like the other 9,000+ schools that will get additional funding under the Turnbull government's reform to school education, Mr Speaker. $18.6 billion over the next decade, a 75% increase, more money for the independent sector, more money for the Catholic sector and more money for the government sector. Indeed, the Catholic sector is getting an additional $1.2 billion, Mr Speaker. This is a needs-based system. This is a transparent system, Mr Speaker. This is a nationally consistent system. And indeed, we're adding emphasis on excellence too. And that's what David Gonski is undertaking review for. And I would have loved to have been in the Leader of the Opposition's office when he saw that third podium being filled by David Gonski when he joined the Minister for Education and the Prime Minister for that announcement, Mr Speaker. And indeed, the government's announcement has been welcomed by the Grattan Institute, by the Association of Christian Schools, by the Primary Principals Association, by the State Schools Organisation, Mr Speaker. They have all welcomed it. Indeed, this is what the head of the Christian schools had said. We'd like to loudly applaud a policy approach that is good for all schools. Well done for providing a model that can be applied fairly across all sectors and jurisdictions. Mr Speaker, that's from the Australian Association of Christian Schools. Now, I'm asked, am I aware of any alternative approaches? Well, we know that the member for Sydney is not really focused on education anymore, Mr Speaker. We know because the member for Grayndler is out of the box. He's out of the box. The baton's out of his knapsack. The baton's out of his knapsack. So we saw the reach tell. We saw the reach tell to poll. And the reach tell poll had the poor member for Watson down at 8.5%, the poor member for McMahon at 8.5%. The Leader of the Opposition could only get 26%. The member for Grayndler could get 26.2%, but who got 30.7%? The member for Sydney, Mr Speaker. The member for Sydney. So you might be focused on 27 separate deals for education. You might be focusing on pulling money out like you did PFO in 2013. Only we can deliver better schools funding, and we will do it as a coalition government under the Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull.